Okay, Nicole, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm excited about this. This is awesome. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. I was so happy that you agreed, and I think it's such a cool thing you have going on here.
Likewise.
So, thank you.
Needed, yeah.
To start, first question, as always, what is your definition of masculinity?
I feel like where I've kind of come to is an understanding that masculinity or masculine energy is essentially the container. I feel like there's a lot of narratives about like being a provider or a protector, things like that. And I think to be a little bit less linear, to me, it's just the energy that's able to like hold and contain something. I feel like that's what it's really shaped into in my practice and kind of just working with individuals and couples. I feel like any type of energy or person that's able to kind of hold a container, I think that's what it really has always like boiled down to for me.
So the container is in the outside, the presentation, or what do you mean by container?
No, more so, honestly, I feel like it's more of an energetic thing as opposed to these kind of like identity profiles that we can sometimes adopt.
Okay.
I feel like any type of energy or person that's able to contain something or hold something, you can provide like emotional like safety and stability and security. You can provide in so many different ways. And there is somewhat of a protective quality to that as well. But yeah, I feel like the masculine energy or masculinity is just any ability to like hold or like contain, I think.
Very cool.
Is what it really is.
I don't think I've heard that. Where do you get that? Where's the foundation for that understanding from?
Truthfully, honestly, just like observing people in my practice over the past like 10 years, I'd say, and probably I'd say just like observing humanity over, I guess, like my life too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I'd say primarily from my practice with like working with individuals and couples. So probably my basis is primarily obviously like fertility focused.
Yeah.
So there's like such a dance between two like individuals, and so that's probably where it comes from.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I guess it kind of but reinforces kind of what we see day to day too, in that the outside presentation of that container doesn't actually really matter in a sense. It's completely disconnected in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think everybody can really embody like both to some degrees. I feel like it's always kind of interchanging and interplaying between the two. And then I feel like, yeah, individuals probably are a little bit more like dominant in one over the other, but yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so how does that, let's transition right into kind of the fertility side of things then. Like how does that energy play in? Where do you see it? And I mean, is it necessary?
Yeah, I feel like it's so necessary. I feel like, how does it kind of tie into fertility? Because you essentially need both, even from just a fundamental Chinese medicine perspective. You're always working with like the internal systems of like yin and yang in the system. So you're like masculine, you're feminine, all of it. And then also if you're essentially trying to conceive or create life, there's just inherently those two at play. And so we're always kind of working with that in an individual, but then also with like a partnership as well too. So I'd say it's like, it's like huge in the role of fertility.
And it's interesting you said in the individual and in the partnership, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there can be, I mean, in the, I guess, stereotypical or traditional way, you would have one more feminine and then one more masculine, but you can, you're saying there can be masculine and feminine in both.
Absolutely.
To varying degrees.
Yeah. I mean, like anything in the entire universe really technically kind of has both, right? Like, yeah. So I feel like with individuals, because you're working with an individual system and level of health for one person, but then also like two people are essentially trying to like co-create something too, right? So, yeah.
Okay, and then so the male presence in, I guess, the fertility process.
Yeah.
What is the thing you work on the most? What is the thing you identify with the most and see the most in practice with working with males and what you've seen, I guess?
With men, I'd say first there's a level of like hesitation. I'd say that's primarily been like the biggest thing, because even when I first started treating like 9-10 years ago, it was incredibly rare that I ever saw a man in my practice. It was just rare. Like it was always women. And now it's like increasingly more common. I feel like over the past couple years, there's been like a huge shift, and men are a lot more physically involved, and they kind of understand, oh, I have a huge part to play in this.
Yep.
But yeah, working with men in practice, I'd say, yeah, it usually starts out with a level of hesitation. And I find that it's really interesting because usually women are super forthcoming with like everything. They're like, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I'll go into as much detail. There's not a lot of resistance or hesitation. But men, I used to think there was a lot of resistance or not a lot of accountability. But now I feel like I perceive it as a really beautiful innate ability to be a little bit more selective about where they feel a certain level of safety, or like with information, or who they're kind of releasing information to. And so I feel like they have just like a stronger ability to kind of
be vulnerable.
Just like decipher between when it's safe for them to offer up vulnerability and when it's not.
Okay.
Which I think is actually really important.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So just the judgment on when it's safe or not.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And then I on a little bit more of just like a physiological level, for men, there's like a couple things that contribute hugely to their overall health and their fertile capability or their reproductive health. And I'd say hugely, like sleep is significant for their health, their immune systems as well, and then their like cardiovascular health as well too is like huge for them too. So yeah.
It's interesting you're talking about kind of the male presence in there and that kind of thing. And I remember when Callie and I were trying, and we didn't try for long, luckily, and unluckily. Luckily and unluckily. But when she started taking all these supplements and that kind of thing, that wasn't even something that was on my radar, right? Like it's not something that's taught to men, as in, it's just like your role in the process is to get the sperm going.
Totally.
And that's it. That's kind of their traditional.
Oh yeah. It's like your role is kind of pretty quick, and then I'll take it from here. And I feel like I feel like men are socialized that way. I feel like the most common narratives kind of follow that as well too. And so it leaves them feeling a lot of the times confused and kind of out of the conversation, or also a little bit like, I wouldn't say helpless, but I've come to realize men deeply want to contribute and deeply want to help, but just like nobody's looking at them, nobody's even asking them questions, and that's in almost every aspect of the system, to be honest. Right. Even if you look at something as simple as like an intake form, women's health intake form is extensive, and we did a ton of research on a bunch of intake forms, mainly for the clinic because it's a continuous work in progress. But we, looked at a lot of different intake forms, and even if there was a men's health section, it was so minimal. Right. It was so minimal. So even like nobody's asking them questions. There's very little to almost no guidance or support in terms of, okay, what does your reproductive health even look like? How is it a contributing factor to everything? And also, what can you do about it? And I do think too that as women, since we're really young, we go through puberty and we have something significant, right? Like our menstrual cycle starts, and that's a continuous, almost monthly for most people, like interaction or like attunement to our reproductive health, right? We are in association with it continuously throughout our life since we're really young. But for men, I mean, quote me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty much like abstinence based and like just be really careful, and that's pretty much all you're ever told about anything, right? Like you don't understand how your overall health contributes to your reproductive health. You don't really know, what does my reproductive health even mean? What does that look like? What can I do for it? So they're just like left out of the conversation from honestly a very early age, and it's actually really unfortunate because their contribution is significant.
Yeah, and I think that we're finding more about that now. I know I've recently even seen studies that say like a man's eating habits or his sleep or everything actually results in a healthier baby and a healthier pregnancy and things
100%.
like that, right? And that's just not even being asked by Callie, like, hey, are you going to take these supplements? I'm like, well, nothing's wrong. Like, let me just, let's try first. And if not, then I'll take the supplements, right? It's like, it's not even that step. I mean, maybe now it would be different if we were to ever try again, which I'm cut now, so it's not going to happen. But it's, completely different, the concept of whose role it is to contribute to that baby in that way, right?
Well, and probably more so you were just thinking, okay, if something's wrong, then I'll do something, or I'll look into it, or I'll find options. But at my baseline, everything's fine, right? Yeah. I feel like that's interesting because I feel like men are like that, even with just generally going to the doctor for anything health-wise, right? Yeah. Like, what do you?
I'm not trying to constantly optimize my performance. I'm just like, if nothing's wrong, I'm not going to go.
It's fine,
right? Yeah. It's like routine maintenance doesn't.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Totally.
There you go.
Totally. And that's honestly, that I feel like translates hugely to how men classically have shown up in the realm of conception or fertility in general. But that's not just because there's like a lack of accountability on their part. It's just
we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. No one's ever told you anything about your life.
Well, and I think a big portion of it is too that we are separated from the pregnancy after the conception happens. Even one of my friends, when I was describing, I said, hey, we're pregnant. And he's like, she's pregnant.
Callie's pregnant.
Callie's pregnant. And I'm like, no, we're pregnant. Like, I am doing all these extra things. I'm making, like, I am involved in this process as much as I can be, even though I'm not holding the baby, right? And so that is a stigma. I guess it's a stigma in a way. But just the concept of framing it like that, where we are just outside of the process, right?
That's so funny. My husband says the same thing. He's like, no, we carried her. And he like jokes all the time, but it's true. I feel like we're even understanding too, the like hormonal fluctuation that men go through pregnancy is significant, and even postpartum as well. It's so you guys really were pregnant. Like, yes.
I don't want to like take the baby.
Exactly. I don't want to.
And that's the thing.
But it's apples and oranges.
When I'm talking to some people about it, some guys that like. Callie laughs at me all the time because I brought up this one story. Someone was like praising his wife for all the hard work she did. And I was like, you did a lot of work too, buddy. Yeah. And he said, no, I did nothing. And I'm like, no, you did, right? Like you've contributed a lot, and you just wouldn't identify with it. And I find that to be very, very sad, right?
Yeah, like, that actually is really,
And I hate
to even like receive that.
And to have that point of view on my side, it almost comes off as I'm downplaying the woman's role in it, and I don't want that to be the case. But I'm just like we can lift up both sides without bringing down the other. Right?
Yeah.
So But what is, I guess, when you said it kind of starts with hesitancy, what is kind of the transit? Like, what does the process look like when getting a male involved in the fertility process to enhance fertility from your end?
Like in terms of, like, what do we have to do to get them involved, or like,
A little bit of both. Is it? I mean, I'm sure there is a little bit of psychology going on there. There's some open-ended conversations, just like education, but like, what does the process look like for the men? Do you see a lot of resistance? Do you see them being excited? I mean, at this point, if they're coming to this clinic, I'm sure they've kind of they're not being dragged here in a way that's maybe they are.
Some of them still are initially, and it's so interesting. I feel like I've had a huge shift in how I really like perceive men in that sense too, because to be honest, it used to be quite frustrating. I mean, when I first started treating, it was not even on my radar to consider men or to treat the other half. But then once I started to realize actually how significant it did feel like it was like pulling teeth.
Right.
More often than not, you're having to go through their partner. So then they're kind of being either like dragged, or when men came in, they were like, okay, well, my wife told me to come.
Yeah.
And that can be helpful in some senses to kind of just be like a little bit of a bridge to just even get them in. But then we have to know how to support them when they're here.
Yeah.
I'd say now they're a lot more forthcoming than I've ever seen. And I think that's just, I feel like over the past couple of years, there's been a lot more information and education, and even just things online in terms of something as simple as, oh, men's testosterone levels have decreased by like 50% in the past 40 years.
Wow. So
then men start to understand like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe this is something that I should look into or get some support with, or so it is easier now, I would say, or men are a little bit more open to kind of being involved in the process. But I think that it needed to come from them. I think having their partner be another person that's kind of, I don't want to say nagging, but kind of having to like push or persuade doesn't always work, or it does contribute to a lot more resistance.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, I don't know. It could be a million things. I mean, I for myself, when somebody really like pushes, or I can feel this ulterior driving force, it makes me want to be like, I actually want nothing to do with it. Not even because it's genuinely what I want, but I don't want to feel forced.
Yeah.
And I think men can feel that. I think they can feel when they're kind of being like forced or pushed. And I think, yeah, it makes them less likely to want to like explore that option. Yeah. And I think sometimes a couple of things that I've heard is men sometimes having this idea of, oh, like, what if I'm the problem? There is very much in the world of fertility of like, okay, what's the problem? Where's the problem? Who's the problem kind of thing? And that just is stressful in general, right? To think, oh, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm...
That's almost like being unable to reproduce, whether you want to or not, is almost like it's like a fundamental piece of masculinity, right? Especially when it's like, yeah, if you can't sire children, what are you doing as a man almost?
That feels devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So to be told that, or to be pushed into a clinic where it's like, we're going to find out if that is you, right? And it sucks because there's kind of this two-way street where it's like, it almost has to be that way, where you're looking for the problem. You're problem solving in a way.
Totally. You're trying to find root cause, what's going on here.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're not placing fault on anything. It's not really a...
Yeah, the biggest thing that I always say is we're not necessarily trying to like induce a pregnancy. We're trying to look at both systems to see, okay, where are kind of the imbalances that are happening here? Where are certain stressors on the entire system, to look at how we can start to rebalance them or optimize them so that pregnancy is like a byproduct of that.
Right.
And sometimes when you reframe it in that way, it feels a little less, okay, we're going to investigate into both to find what's wrong so that then we can fix it. Right. Because there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong. It's just there's something that's happening that is causing a bit of a blockage, right? Our reproductive systems are pretty tender. They're pretty vulnerable. So if anything is imbalanced health-wise or within your system, it's usually one of the first things that goes, because your body is just essentially like, we have bigger fish to fry. Making a baby is the least of our worries right now. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then I wanted to touch on kind of that shame a little bit more. Like how does that, have you seen it much? How does that get worked through?
Yeah, I would say the biggest things that I kind of notice it with is kind of how we were talking about that provider concept. I think that can look very different for everybody, but usually a few common themes that I've seen is men essentially really wanting to provide some type of happiness or fulfillment for their partner. Women, when they kind of consciously or subconsciously decide that they want to grow their family or they want to have a baby, it can be like all it can be incredibly intense. It can be incredibly dysregulating for them, and it can be like a yearning like you've never felt before in your life. And it can be incredibly maddening because typically throughout our lives we're kind of told if you just work hard enough, if you just like push forward, you can achieve anything you want. And sometimes babies want no part in that energy, so it can be really difficult. And oftentimes I when I kind of sit or talk to men, they usually feel like they want to provide some type of like emotional regulation or some type of happiness to their partner. Like I often hear them say like, I see her suffering and I don't know what to do about it. I just want to be able to give her anything essentially. I want to give her a baby. I want to give her happiness. I want to give her safety. I want to give her these things. And so I feel like that's a common thing that I've kind of seen or heard. And then also too, the amount of pressure too, I think is a significant one. And again, I think that we don't classically think as men's health or systems as being kind of fragile in any way, really. And not that the entire thing is, but there's aspects of it that are. And so when they feel an immense amount of pressure, a lot of the times we see things like difficulties with performance, so like erectile difficulties or things like that. And that I feel like for a man is, it carries like a lot with that too. Absolutely. Right? So I feel like there's a lot of shame with that sometimes too. And really discombobulating too, because a lot of the times previously there was no issues, but then when you start to try, there does become issues. And so that's probably very confusing, and it's also probably riddled with shame as well. And again, there's little to no support for that. They just think either they silently suffer, which I feel like is incredibly common and unfortunate, but also a lot of the times in a lot of options that are out there, everything is overriding a man's system. Even something as simple as going through a round of IVF, they'll do a semen analysis, and if things are even kind of suboptimal, they'll just do something called ICSI, which is like essentially where they actually take the sperm and implant it into the egg. So almost at every angle, we're like overriding a man's system. Okay, if you are having any performance issues, we can just give you a medication for it, and then, or we can even do like an at-home insemination kit, so you don't even have to. So you can just kind of override that too. So we
cut override the equation.
100%. 100%. I feel like, I don't know, like how would you feel if you'd feel obsolete, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? If it's like we're gonna make this baby together and all of a sudden I'm not even part of it in a way. Like you're just being taking my role in it. What I've been told my role in it is all of a sudden now just being offset to an at-home kit. It's like, well, 100%. What am I doing here, right? Yeah, that's shattering for sure.
100%. It is like really
So I guess I'll let you talk about like your practice a little bit here. Like, what is the kind of process? Take me through kind of the steps. Do you see people coming in right off the bat, or is it like, okay, we've been trying for a while and we're having troubles, and what direction do you take them?
I'd say primarily still we usually are, I don't want to say we're a last resort for people, but usually our client base has been trying for a while or has tried other options without success, or they do actually have reproductive issues that have been investigated and found out. Increasingly more so now, we're starting to get a lot more people that even before they actively start, they just want to prep themselves as best as they can. And so that's really exciting because I never used to see that in my career, even just with women. But now I feel like we're seeing a lot more both people coming in and like, we want to start trying to conceive, but we want to try and kind of be as prepared as we can or do what we can to optimize things. So that's really exciting. But I'd say primarily our patient base is people who have been trying for quite a long time, have had things like losses, or have tried other options and without any success. And so our process is a little bit more kind of how I said, I always explain to everybody, we're not trying to induce some type of pregnancy. So sometimes that feels not counteractive or counterproductive, but it feels different because typically up to the point that they come here, it's pretty one-track minded. We're looking for a positive pregnancy test. We're looking to be pregnant and sustain the pregnancy. That's kind of the main focus. And so initially we always kind of like to reframe that for people, that the process of trying to conceive can and should look a little bit different. And that usually then actually alleviates a lot of stress for people. It kind of gives you an opportunity to have a bit more of like a broader picture instead of being so like narrow-minded or one singular goal-minded, if that makes sense. So
focus on because I even picture about our journey, like we obviously didn't try very long, but it was very like, okay, this is what's happening and here we go. We didn't even, there wasn't any problem solving or breaking it up, but I could see how that would be if you're I want to say banging your head against the wall with it, but
sometimes hopefully
if it's over and over just the same thing and no results, then it's like, okay, that's extremely frustrating. When then right? So then they come in and they do they see you first, or like you say it's a holistic fertility group, so what is that like?
So usually we start out with just a little bit of a consultation or assessment just to get an idea of where people are at, what they've kind of done so far, if they've had any type of investigation done, if they've had any previous treatments done, what have they tried? And then I always like to get an idea of why they sought us out as an option. Because it helps me understand essentially how they really want to shape this process. What are they really wanting from it? What do they really want it to look like? And if there are certain ways to go about it that are more in alignment with how they kind of want the process to go too. Because some people have very hard and fast rules. Like some people are like, okay, I don't want to do any type of medications. I don't want to do any type of like really invasive procedures, things like that. And some people are like, I'm good honestly with whatever. I just kind of want to know what's going on. Or some people are already at a phase where they kind of know what's going on and they need help with something specific. So it just gives me an idea of, where they're at, what they've done, and kind of how they want to shape this. And then, usually I kind of, bring some stuff to our team, communicate with a couple practitioners, and then usually we'll create a little bit of a treatment plan for them, or a process forward essentially. And so all of our modalities and our practitioners are holistic based. So we have things like chiropractic care, working heavily with the nervous system. We have acupuncturists. We do customized Chinese herbal formulas. We do a lot of like pelvic health stuff. We do some body work stuff. We do somatic therapy. And then we can do some investigation as well too, with like live and dried blood analysis, or just regular like hormonal testing and semen analysis, things like that. And then we kind of curate a plan for them, and and then kind of start them up with treatment.
Awesome. And it seems like with all the pictures on the wall, it seems like things are going well.
Touch wood, honestly, we feel really, really blessed. And it's never lost on me whenever anybody comes in and tells me they're pregnant. It's just the most.
I was going to say, that's like,
my gosh.
That's literally life-changing for people, right? And if they've been searching for it.
And that's just like never lost on me that we get to be a part of that in people's process. We just had a couple that called this morning, and she took a pregnancy test on the weekend and they were positive, and they've been trying for like a year and a half with no success. And just, and she was like, we've just over the past hour been calling our friends and our family. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to be one of those calls. That's just so yeah, it's just so,
Every time.
honestly such an incredible blessing. It's
amazing.
Yeah, never lost on me. It's wild.
And what do you see like the future of fertility being? Because you see so many different things. You see like gene splicing, you see like at home incubation, external kits, and you see just that there's just so many different roads it can go down. Like obviously you mentioned the Chinese medicine, which is very traditional and holistic and person-centered. So what is your view of kind of the future of fertility on the male and female side?
I mean, I think I can really only speak from my lens, because I think there's always things happening in many different areas. And I mean, what we kind of see day in, day out, and just the way that we go about things, it's like one small pocket of fertility. So I can really only speak from my lens.
Okay.
But based off of kind of our patient base and where we're kind of going and kind of what I've been seeing, I really do think that there is a bit of a shift to a bit more of like a remembering. I think people are kind of coming back to themselves a little bit. I think we're being a little bit more conscious of outsourcing so much of ourselves, and so much of our power in this process too. And I think there's a shift of a little bit more like turning inwards to figure out how I can and how I can kind of guide myself through this whole process. I think that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing, and also the biggest thing probably that fascinates me the most too. So it's probably why that would be my answer. But I do really think that it's been a really long process of overriding our natural rhythms, of overriding our systems, of and I think that we're starting to come back to it a bit and kind of go a little bit more with our natural rhythms.
I like that. And it's a theme that I hear a lot. And like when I practice with my clients, it's like we're so disconnected from ourselves, right? Like so disconnected when it comes to like the tech and blah, blah, blah. And we're getting to this point where we just can't do it anymore, right? We can't be, we have not evolved to be like this. So of course things are going wrong, right?
Yeah.
Of course there's all these mental health issues. Of course there's relational issues. Of course there's fertility
It's not
issues.
pathological. It's like expected. Like, of course. Yeah, I totally agree.
Right. So that makes a lot of sense to me as well. And it's basically a necessity to come back to it, right? Or to supplement and cope with like more technology, but that's just further disconnection, right?
Totally.
So.
And I mean, if you think about fertility, or even just something as simple as like a woman's like menstrual ovulatory cycle, it's a rhythm.
I was going to ask this.
Even something as simple as like honestly a men's like daily like cycle too.
It's 24 versus 28 or
it's so divinely designed, and when you start to actually, and that's why I think it's always so funny when people are either like, oh, I'm super spiritual, or I'm like very science-based.
Sure.
I'm like, the further that I've gone into science, I feel like the more spiritual I've become, because I feel like they are so deeply
I love it.
integrated. And it's just, even something as simple as, so for instance, like intimacy. So obviously, you have your fertile window, you have all of these things. And yes, you are working towards a goal. And so sometimes that doesn't always look super spontaneous. It doesn't look always super intimate and really passionate. However, something as simple as like shifting when you are actively trying to conceive based off of like when men have like higher arousal or higher libido is significant. So something as simple as, I always ask men, when do you find your libido to be highest in the day? Or when do you feel most aroused in the day? And most men will say usually in the morning. And so they've even done studies to show, they've taken semen analysis from different parts of the day. And usually in the morning, if arousal is highest, their testosterone levels are higher and their sperm motility actually is higher as well. So something as simple as that is like going with your natural rhythm instead of, okay, well, she took an ovulation test and this is her fertile window and we can kind of only fit it in here because she has to go to work and I'm on night shift and whatever. And it's like, I get it. Life happens. It can't always be this like really beautiful, intimate, passionate process. Sometimes you kind of just got to do what you got to do for an end goal. However, when you start to look at your natural rhythms or even just become more attuned to them, it gives you the answers of like what might potentially work, right? So I don't know. I think there's definitely a bit more of a shift to going with our natural rhythms. And I think honestly, I think it's incredibly important when it comes to fertility.
I think so too. Yeah. So it's everything, right? And can you talk about those 2 fertility cycles a little bit? Because they've been coming up more and more in conversation. I've seen them. I know there's a big thing on social media about it. My sister's talking about it. Tell me about let's do the male one first, and then you can briefly go over the female one if you don't mind.
Yeah, so from my understanding, men go through a 24-hour cycle, so their hormones shift within like a day essentially is like their biggest fluctuation. And women go through with their menstrual ovulatory cycle, typically, classically 28 days. Give or take a day, a couple days on the other end. So that's their biggest hormonal fluctuation. So, I mean, that's
the basis of it?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then, so based on the hormones that are present, we have different emotions, different physiological function.
Like your brain chemistry changes, your physiology changes, your like mental emotional state changes, your gut health changes. Like there's significant shifts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, I'm thinking about it from like a psychological perspective. And it's like, how often do you think that maybe a woman goes into treatment, she's feeling very anxious, blah, 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 and she goes in and some psychologist or psychiatrist who isn't aware or hasn't been taught, because I am just finishing my master's and this wasn't even brought up, right? So it's like, how often, she's in at the beginning of the month every month, and this psychologist is like, well, you know what, you need meds, right? As opposed to, hey, this is just that time of the month, but not that time of the month, right? You know, like it's just that point in your fluctuation of hormones or something like that.
Well, yeah, I feel like even for men as well too, something as like hormonally, men experience a lot of different shifts in health-wise, depending on kind of where their hormones are at too. So like a lot of men, for instance, if they have thyroid issues or if they have like lower testosterone, they can be more prone to anxiety. Same with women, depending on where they're at, like if they're in their luteal phase or their phase kind of right before they're about to have their period, usually they can get a lot of PMS symptoms. And that's your body responding to essentially like the drop in hormones. So even from a psychologist standpoint, if you can kind of start to track, okay, have you noticed that actually your anxiety increases kind of before your cycle? Maybe be mindful of that. And being able to even give tools and techniques to, okay, depending on kind of where you're at, maybe we can shift what we're doing or utilizing dependent on your cycle too. Similar to I feel like there's a lot of trainers now too that work with women based off of where they're at in their cycle. I feel like you could probably have different psychology or counseling techniques depending on where women are at in their cycle too. Probably, so
And then I want to talk a little bit about the energy too, like a little bit more, I should say, the feminine and masculine energy existing in both of us. And so how do you see that presented in like the fertility process? Like how is that represented, and how do you, I don't know, capitalize on it or make sure that both are being fostered or brought out, or like, what does that look like? Do you use that?
I would say quite a bit, and I would say probably a foundational aspect of my practice. I don't know if I've necessarily ever directly thought of it like that, I guess, or you like actively thought to, okay, that I need to like utilize this in some way, but usually, and this is why it's so helpful to see both parties, because then you're working with 100% of the puzzle as opposed to one. You're kind of getting one side, you're kind of working with one system. It can give you also an idea of their dynamic too. And once you start to kind of get a feel for that or kind of recognize that, it honestly, I feel like often gives a lot of context as to what's happening to them health-wise. So often I would say quite frequently we usually have women that come in that are just in a state of like really trying. They're kind of trying everything they possibly can, but they're doing as much research as they possibly can. They are well versed in honestly a lot of things that just like your average person shouldn't. And like my hormones, and I think I'm progesterone deficient because I have these symptoms, and I was researching here, and they're actively trying. They're like really trying. And so it kind of just puts them in a state of like tightness and also of kind of full speed ahead. I don't want to say dominating because I feel like there's such a intense feeling to that word, but they really are. They've like taken everything and they're running with it. And so they're also deeply unsatisfied too, a lot of the times. But when you start to kind of bring their partner in and you kind of see, oh, okay, she's kind of like up here. She's really got a lot of like yang energy that she's like going with. And then usually in that scenario anyways, you have the man that kind of comes in and you kind of realize that they're actually quite deficient. So there is just this natural imbalance that's happened, either was there previously and then just got worse, or it kind of started to create. And so one's really high and one's really low, or one's really excessive, one's really deficient. And you can see that in how they communicate, the like issues that they're starting to have. You can see it in their hormones. You can see it in like so many things. And so once you kind of start to work with those or incorporate those or use it as like a piece of the puzzle, it usually gives so much context. And then we're always trying to like, okay, how can we kind of bring these back? And so you can do that in a multitude of different ways. I mean, it's why we really created this place, but usually it's always about, okay, how do we balance these internally for an individual? And then also, there's like a dynamic at play here. There's two people that are trying to co-create something. And what's that like interplay, that's happening there?
It honestly sounds like it kind of transitions into couples therapy more often than not.
100%. I mean, there's literal psychologists that work specifically with people that are struggling with fertility, because that's also another devastating thing, is it can really like wreak havoc on your relationship, which is really, I mean, devastating. We want a healthy baby, but we also want a healthy like family structure.
Do you have psychologists here?
No, we have a somatic therapist. So she does a lot of like somatic work and education, but no psychologist specifically yet.
Well, I should have brought my resume.
There you go. There honestly, I feel like, I really do feel like there needs to be, I think it would be really helpful if there were more men that were able to support couples, to be honest.
Interesting. Okay. Is there anything specific you wanted to bring up? We're kind of coming to the end of the time.
No, I feel like that. I feel like no. I feel like there's nothing else really.
That's okay.
That I have. Just that I mean, not to get too big picture about all of this, but it's so interesting because I feel like I was just talking to Jeanine about this the other day, that if 10 years ago you would have told me that I would be working with men or like this compassionate about men, I would have laughed at you. I honestly, and I do feel a certain level of grief that I really did spend so much time viewing men in a honestly a really devastating way. And I felt really disappointed by men, to be honest. And now in my practice, I have just like such deep reverence for them. And I feel like we've really done them such a disservice. And I feel like it actually makes me quite emotional, because I honestly do feel like they're like wildly misunderstood. And they just hold so much power and so much significant contribution, especially in this. I mean, it's just what I see every day. Not that it's the only area that they can contribute in, but just the amount of potential that they hold for their entire family system is so powerful and so beautiful. And I just feel like nobody's telling them that. I feel like nobody's supporting them in like realizing that or living up to that. If anything, I feel like we are like stripping them of that. Or
I was gonna say,
like,
it's kind of done, but it's done in a negative way, right? Like it's like all or nothing, be a certain thing, and but your role is also you're involved. You're involved, but you're not. It's so complicated. Well, on behalf of all men, thank you.
Thank you, honestly.
For the recognition, but like, I think it's hard, because I mean, it's specifically like what I'm trying to do with this podcast is open up these conversations, and it's like, well, why did you feel that, right? Like you were taught that, we are also taught that we are this workhorse, right? Like, and we're supposed to come out and just do whatever, but we're so much more than that, right? And there's, like you said, it's visible here in your practice. It's visible in who you see and what you've experienced. And how do we foster more of that, do you think?
I think, like from my perspective as a practitioner, I think it's really, really important for us to be really conscious and aware of the invitation that we're putting out to men. And also I think we need to be really well equipped and conscious when they do step into our spaces, because I think it is a little bit delicate. And I think that if we're able to foster a space for them and also support them in a way that actually works for them, I think it'll make the world a difference. Right. Classically, so for instance, I don't know, do you know who Connor Beaton is? He on Instagram, Man Talks. Yeah. Yes, so he's actually a Canadian guy. Okay. But I'm like, I have such deep respect for him. He's unbelievable. But he has a course specifically how to work with men. So it's for like psychologists, coaches, practitioners, things like that, and how to actually work with men. Right. And so I took his course, and it was so mind-blowing to me, because I realized, how I was going about supporting men or treating men or wherever they were in my treatment room, I was treating them like I was treating women. And I had 8 years of tried and tested techniques and research and experience with women. And so I was really good at that. But they do really need to be handled differently. Yeah. And so I think that is a big thing, is I think we need to equip ourselves in a way that actually is supportive for them, instead of trying to like force them into this way that we classically treat women, to be honest, or support women, because it really is different, and it should be different. So I think that's the biggest thing. Cool. I think. Okay. Yeah. And I guess final question then, if you can make kind of one statement or have a message for anybody listening, if it's men specific, women specific, people searching for promising fertility results, what would it be? That I feel like we disregard intuition like way too frequently. Even if we're kind of kind about it, we don't actually factor it into the equation. I think that we honestly treat it like it's kind of a nuisance more than anything. But anytime I've ever followed that, even if somebody doesn't have the necessary verbiage or medical knowledge to understand what they're feeling or what kind of keeps popping up for them or what they're curious about or what they feel like is going on, I always ask all of my patients, what do you think's going on? Or is there anything specific that pops up for you frequently that you're like, I feel like something's not right here, or this kind of keeps coming up for me. I don't know what the deal is. Even if you don't have the verbiage or the medical knowledge, anytime I've ever followed that, it has never led me astray. And so I would say that continuously try and factor in your like intuition. And that also too, finding a team, whether it's practitioners or doctors or just anybody to support, is truly like finding a relationship. You guys are all trying to co-create something on a really big level. And so that like matters who you have with you, right? Being able to feel some level of safety, to be honest, or connection in that sense, or it helps, it's significant. So I would say that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. So spend the time, spend the time in the preparation, trust your gut.
Yep.
In a way.
Totally.
I feel like there's not enough finding practitioners to make sure the journey goes as well as possible. You're not admitting anything's wrong, right? Like you're just making sure you're optimizing for the best solution, essentially.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Cool. And no like one person is going to need the exact same thing as the other, right? Yeah. So yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This is awesome.
Perfect.